Some people walk into a room and immediately make others feel a little nervous. Not because they're rude, not because they're trying to dominate anyone. And sometimes they don't even realize they're doing it. They're simply standing there, talking normally, going about their day, while someone else is quietly becoming more careful about what they say, how they behave, and even where they look. The strange part is that the person creating this reaction may genuinely have no idea. They aren't trying to intimidate anyone. They may not even think of themselves as particularly confident. But there's something about the way they carry themselves that other people interpret differently. Because intimidation isn't always created by aggression. Sometimes it's created by composure. Some simply don't react as much as others expect them to. Someone makes a sarcastic comment and they don't immediately laugh. Someone criticizes them and they don't become defensive. Someone tries to provoke them, and instead of escalating, they simply look at them for a moment and continue what they were doing. To the person behaving this way, nothing unusual is happening, but to someone watching, that calmness can feel surprisingly powerful. We're used to receiving information from other people's reactions. A smile tells us we're accepted. Nervous laughter tells us someone feels uncomfortable. Anger tells us we've crossed a line. Excitement tells us we've captured someone's attention. But when someone gives you very little emotional information, you have fewer clues about what they're thinking, and the human mind doesn't particularly enjoy uncertainty. So, it starts filling in the blanks. Did I say something wrong? Or, are they judging me? What are they thinking? The person may not be judging anyone at all, but their silence can accidentally become intimidating because other people are left to interpret it. Sometimes, the less information we receive from someone, the more information our own imagination creates. And then there's eye contact. Some people naturally maintain strong eye contact while listening. They're not trying to establish dominance, they're simply paying attention. But prolonged, calm eye contact can make certain people extremely self-conscious. Suddenly, they're thinking about their facial expression, their posture, their words, and where they're supposed to look. Ironically, the more comfortable the other person appears, the more uncomfortable they can become. That's because confidence doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes confidence looks incredibly ordinary. It's someone who doesn't constantly check whether everyone approves of them. They don't laugh at everything just to keep the atmosphere comfortable. They don't agree with every opinion in the room. They don't desperately try to become everyone's favorite person. And when someone doesn't appear to need approval, people can find them difficult to read. There's something quietly powerful about someone who doesn't seem to be asking permission to be themselves. There's another quality that can be surprisingly intimidating: being comfortable with silence. Some people can't stand an awkward pause. The moment conversation becomes quiet, they immediately rush to fill it. But other people can sit there comfortably. They don't panic. They don't start explaining themselves. They don't desperately search for another topic. They simply allow the silence to exist. And to someone who associates silence with discomfort, that calmness can feel incredibly powerful. It can create the impression that this person is completely comfortable with themselves. Of course, that may not actually be true. Someone can be nervous internally while appearing completely relaxed externally. But people don't have access to your internal world. They can only respond to what you show them. Another trait is being difficult to pressure. Some people are extremely polite, but they have surprisingly firm boundaries. You ask them to do something they don't want to do, and they simply say, no. No elaborate explanation, no nervous apology, no 10-minute speech about why they feel bad, just, no, I can't. And that's it. For someone accustomed to getting their way through persistence, guilt, emotional pressure, or social expectations, this can be extremely uncomfortable. Because the person isn't fighting them. They're simply not moving. And sometimes, that's far more intimidating than an argument. Then there are people who are quietly competent. They don't constantly announce what they're capable of. They don't need everyone to know how intelligent they are. They just seem to understand what they're doing. They speak when they have something useful to say. They listen carefully. They remember details. And when something goes wrong, they don't immediately fall apart. This can create an interesting contrast. The person themselves might be thinking, I'm literally just trying to get through the day. Meanwhile, someone else is thinking, this person has everything figured out. And that's an important part of unintended intimidation. Other people's perception doesn't necessarily match reality. Someone can appear extremely confident while secretly questioning themselves. Someone can look emotionally unshakable while actually being incredibly sensitive. Someone can seem mysterious simply because they're naturally private. And someone can appear intimidating simply because they aren't particularly expressive. This is why facial expressions matter too. Some people naturally have a serious resting expression. They're not angry, they're not annoyed, they're not secretly plotting someone's downfall, they're just standing there. But if their face doesn't constantly communicate warmth, other people may interpret neutrality as disapproval. And once someone believes you're judging them, they can start behaving differently around you. They become more cautious. They monitor themselves. They might even start trying to impress you. And now, something fascinating happens. Their reaction can reinforce the very impression you never intended to create. You notice they're nervous around you, so you become quieter because you don't know what to say. They interpret your quietness as intimidation, so they become even more nervous. You become even more confused. Suddenly, two people are having completely different experiences in the same conversation. One person is thinking, "Why are they acting so strangely?" The other is thinking, "Why does this person make me so nervous?" Neither person necessarily understands what's happening, and sometimes what looks like intimidation from the outside is actually nothing more than two people misunderstanding each other's signals. And sometimes the strongest source of intimidation is simply not needing to perform. There are people who don't dramatically change their personality depending on who's watching. They're roughly the same person whether they're talking to a close friend, a stranger, a coworker, or someone they desperately want to impress. That consistency can be surprisingly powerful, because most social environments involve some degree of performance. We adjust our tone, we choose our words, we become slightly funnier around certain people and slightly more serious around others. We want to be liked, we want to fit in, we want to be understood. So when someone appears completely comfortable being themselves, it can make everyone else suddenly aware of how much they're adjusting. And that doesn't necessarily mean the intimidating person is better than them. It simply means they seem less dependent on the room's approval. But there's something important to remember. If people seem intimidated by you, it doesn't automatically mean you're exceptionally confident, powerful, mysterious, or superior. Sometimes you're just quiet. Sometimes you're serious. Sometimes you're difficult to read. And sometimes the other person is bringing their own insecurities into the interaction. We often assume other people's reactions are entirely about us. They're not. People interpret behavior through their own experiences, expectations, fears, and insecurities. The same calm person can make one individual feel safe and another feel nervous. The same direct eye contact can feel respectful to one person and intimidating to another. The same silence can feel peaceful to one person and uncomfortable to someone else. So if you've ever been told that you're intimidating, don't immediately assume you need to change. Maybe you could become a little warmer when you notice someone is uncomfortable. Maybe a smile would make your intentions clearer. Maybe asking a simple question or showing a little more openness could help someone relax. But you don't necessarily have to become louder, more entertaining, or more agreeable just to make everyone comfortable. Because there's a difference between making people uncomfortable and simply not performing for their comfort. There are people who spend their entire lives adjusting themselves to make everyone else feel at ease. They soften every opinion, explain every decision, apologize for every boundary, and fill every silence because they're terrified of being misunderstood. And then there are people who eventually learn that being considerate doesn't mean constantly shrinking yourself. That's perhaps where unintended intimidation becomes most interesting. The people who intimidate others without knowing aren't always the loudest people in the room. They aren't necessarily the most attractive, successful, intelligent, or socially dominant. Sometimes they're simply people who have stopped trying so hard to prove that they belong. They can sit quietly. They can say no. They can maintain eye contact. They can walk away from unnecessary conflict. They can keep their private thoughts private. And they can exist without constantly asking the room, "Am I doing this right?" Maybe that's why some people find them intimidating. Not because they're dangerous, not because they're arrogant, but because they're difficult to shake. And sometimes, the person everyone else finds intimidating is standing there completely unaware that anyone is intimidated at all. They're just being themselves. And perhaps that's the most unexpected kind of presence there is. If this video resonated with you, thank you for spending these few quiet moments with me. And if you enjoyed it, consider subscribing for more videos that explore the hidden patterns behind human behavior. Until next time, take care of yourself, and never underestimate the quiet places where the mind finds its greatest peace.